To Techsommet's virtual event on identity and access management, securing the future of digital access. My name is Jim McDonald, and I've been in the digital identity space for over 20 years. These days, I'm the lead of RSM's Digital Identity Advisory Services practice. RSM is a leader in digital identity consulting, and I co-host a popular podcast, Identity at the Center. You can find us at idacpodcast.com. I'm thrilled to be your host for today's event. We have an exciting and informative day lined up, packed with sessions from some of the leading experts in identity and access management. Today, we will deep dive into the challenges and opportunities within IAM, with topics ranging from protecting legacy systems and service accounts, the biggest challenges organizations face with IAM, and navigating IAM strategies in a cloud-first world during our expert panel discussion. Our goal is to give you valuable insights that you can take back to your teams and apply directly to enhance your security posture and streamline identity management. A few quick housekeeping notes to take care of before we get started. Each session will be followed by a brief Q&A. If you have any questions at any time, please submit them through the Q&A box located on your screen, and we'll address them after the presentations. If you encounter any technical difficulties, feel free to reach out to our support team via chat, and they'll assist you. And finally, we encourage you to participate in the discussions actively and make the most of this opportunity to learn from and interact with today's speakers. Once again, thank you all for joining us today. A special thank you to our gold sponsor, Silverfort, and our silver sponsor, Fisher Identity. Your support is truly appreciated, and this event wouldn't have been possible without you. We also want to extend our gratitude to all of you for being here today. We encourage you to engage actively throughout the session, participate in the Q&A and the polls during the presentations, and make the most of the interactive platform that is made available to you. We're excited to get started and look forward to a productive and insightful day together. So without further ado, let's begin with our first session. Our first session is led by Head Kovitz. Head is the CEO and co-founder of Silverfort. Head brings a unique blend of technical expertise and leadership, having previously led nation-scale cybersecurity products at Verint, where he was recognized for his innovative, patent-pending inventions. Head's background also includes serving as a group leader in the elite 8200 cyber unit of the Israeli Defense Forces, where he earned multiple awards for excellence and innovation. Head has an LLB from Tel Aviv University, and he combines his legal and technical knowledge to lead cutting-edge advancements in cybersecurity. Today, Head will be speaking on the identity security blind spot, protecting legacy systems and service accounts, a crucial topic for securing digital identities in modern environments. Welcome to the virtual event, Head. It's good to see you again.
Thank you, Jim. Great to see you again. Appreciate the introduction. And thank you, everyone, for joining. Very glad to have this chance to talk to you about a topic that I think is very important to anyone dealing with identity and identity security. So I'll talk a little bit about this problem, and I'll try to save enough time for questions. But let me start by introducing what I wanted to discuss today. So a lot of people here that deal with identity and access management and with securing identities through solutions like multi-factor authentication or privileged access management know that there's an area of our infrastructure that is being a little neglected just because it's very hard, very difficult to defend. And those are the legacy assets, right? Our legacy environment, systems like, Active Directory, IT and OT infrastructure, service accounts, things that are just a little more difficult to protect than your modern web applications. So today I wanted to talk about this problem and how can we overcome it in order to solve this blind spot that attackers are using all the time. So what I hope to do in the next minutes is explain to you what I hear from companies that we talk to regarding the challenges. What is our approach to solving the problem? How do we do it? How does the technology really works? And some recent case studies of actual data breaches that we've seen and what they look like these days and what can you do against them. So I'll start by talking a bit about the current identity security landscape and the challenges. I'll start by explaining what is even identity security, because it's a relatively new term that a lot of vendors are using. Right, Jim, we need to talk about it one day deeper, but it is something that a lot of vendors are starting to use, and I think for a good reason. Because if you think about your identity infrastructure, and I'm talking about your Active Directory, your Entra, your Okta, your Ping, that's a pretty fragmented infrastructure in most companies, right? It's built in islands. You got your Active Directory, you have your Entra, you might have your Okta or your Google. And the problem is that because the infrastructure is fragmented, identity security becomes an issue because each of these islands can only apply security locally. This means that if I try to log into Okta and I fail the authentication, so it's not me, I can still log into Entra or to the on-prem AD. Nobody will stop me because these solutions don't really talk to each other when it comes to security. So the concept of identity security that is starting to emerge as a category, I think is very similar to how cloud security started, right? We used to think that we can get cloud security from AWS and from Google and from Azure. And over time, we realized that we actually need a solution to secure all those clouds together, not each of these islands locally. And that's where solutions like Wiz and others started to emerge in order to provide this unified security layer for the cloud. The same has happened, obviously, with endpoints, right? We don't buy endpoint security from Lenovo and Apple and Dell, right? We buy it from a vendor that can secure all of them. And I believe that the same is now happening with identity, where although you have different identity infrastructure solutions that manage your identities, there is a need for a unified security layer on top. So I'll talk a bit about that, but I think where I actually want to focus today even more is the deep corners of the identity infrastructure where no one can actually offer security. Okay, I think that's a very urgent problem for some companies. And in those deep areas of the identity infrastructure, there are blind spots that just don't have security at all. Okay, Active Directory is one of them, where we're still using legacy protocols that can be easily, kind of exploited. Bad configurations, accounts that have all kind of permissions you don't even know about, things like that. Another issue is with systems that don't support multi-factor authentication. So I think we all know today that MFA is important. We're also required by our regulators or cyber insurance providers to apply it. But that's easier said than done in some of our systems, right? Like your legacy systems or your servers that allow command line access. Or your OT infrastructure, right? There are areas where it's just very hard to achieve. How do you even deploy MFA on a file share, right? On a file system, as an example. Another problem is service accounts and other non-human identities. These are accounts that are not used by humans, machine-to-machine access. Those are very difficult to find, to protect. Some people try to do that with a PAM solution. The problem is that if you try to change the passwords on these accounts, they might break. So some applications will just stop working. So if you have many of them, it's becoming really hard to do. It takes years. And then another blind spot has to do with privileged access in general. A lot of us are using PAM solutions, and PAM solutions are generally a good idea. The problem is that the way they are deployed make it very difficult to protect all your privileged users because you might miss a lot of them. It's very complex and expensive to cover all of them. But even worse, we hear from a lot of companies that those solutions just end up being bypassed. And the reason is admins can just check out the credentials from the vault and then use it to go directly to the server the next time. I mean, they can do that until it's rotated again, but that still gives attackers enough time. So if you can just use the credentials outside of the PAM solution without having to go through it, it kind of defeats the purpose. And we hear that as a reason for many of the big data breaches that happened in the recent years. So we want to overcome these blind spots. And each of you can think about what are your top blind spots? Where do you feel in your own company that you have these blind spots? But let me just say a word about why is this even important before I continue into how we can overcome it. So why is this even important? Why is it not enough to just protect our web applications or our VPN? And the answer is that the attacker get to choose how to log into our systems. We can't force him to log in with a certain protocol. So I may think that I have protection, by protecting maybe remote desktop or HTTP or maybe my VPN. But if an attacker can just choose to use PowerShell to log into my server, or grab a service account or connect to a shared folder on a server, and that doesn't have the same protection, then what's the point of even having protection on the front door as long as you leave the window open? We've seen a lot of data breaches that actually happened like this. I think the majority of data breaches these days happen like this. If you even think about the most simple example of ransomware, the way ransomware spreads in a network is with these legacy protocols, almost always just taking advantage of these weak AD protocols and using NTLM, SMB, things like that. So in order to apply protection in this environment where attackers know about our weak spots, we need to somehow bring identity security to everything. Okay, I talked earlier about how do you bring it between Okta and Entra and Ping, but that's also an interesting point. But today I actually want to focus on how do you protect the deep, difficult to protect or unprotectable areas of your environment. And what I want to introduce to you is an approach that we invented over the recent years, and a lot of organizations are already using, that we call unified identity protection. The idea of unified identity protection is that instead of building security into every application and every server individually, which in some cases is impossible, we are applying it from the back end of the existing IAM infrastructure. And I'll show you a diagram of what that means in a minute. But if you think about it, it just means that I try to log into, let's say, Active Directory or to a resource that uses Active Directory. And without changing that, we're still allowing those servers to use those legacy protocols. Silverfort can intercept it from behind the directory and add the missing protection. MFA, conditional access, privilege access security, things like that. That means we can protect basically anything. So legacy systems, command line tools, file shares, IT and OT, things like that. It works for both human and non-human identities because I can also use that to protect service accounts. It doesn't matter what the user is. It works on-prem or in the cloud. It even works in air-gapped networks. We have customers that are defense organizations or manufacturing companies. They don't even have internet in some of the networks. We can deploy even in that situation because the beauty of it is we don't need to deploy all these components across the network. We do it from just one central place from behind the directory. That is it. We don't need to necessarily access the cloud or deploy agents anywhere. And I'll show you what that means, but I just want to show you one quick example of what it looks like because I think that speaking about this theoretically doesn't help understand what this really means. So I'll show you a very quick example of how do you enable the Microsoft MFA with Entra on a legacy protocol, legacy interface. In this case, a remote PowerShell session. Imagine logging into a remote PowerShell session on-prem that uses Active Directory with your Entra sign-in, okay? So this is basically what we achieve. So once we try to log in, we can actually sign in with our Entra account. I'm asking for a password here, but I don't have to. That's up to my Entra configuration. I'm doing MFA, and then my command can actually run on the server. So what I basically did here is I injected modern MFA, modern conditional access, in this case with Entra, but this could have been Okta or Ping or a FIDO token, okay, to a resource that doesn't support modern authentication at all. It's using Kerberos or NTLM. Some systems might be using LDAP or Radius. We can inject this modern sign-in to this legacy protocol, and I'm talking any legacy system. Doesn't even matter what it is. We have customers protecting systems I've never heard about, and it works. And I'll explain quickly how it works. I want to try to get quickly to the end so we can have a little bit of time for questions. And Jim, if people are asking questions on the chat, I can save a little time in the end and tell me which. But I'll explain at least how do we do that. So basically, you have today in your environment all these clients and servers and applications that are authenticating to your identity infrastructure, right? And your identity infrastructure might include a legacy solution, might include some modern solutions. Usually it's hybrid. And we don't want to change it. We don't want to change it because we understand that some of your systems are just stuck with these legacy protocols. And that's okay. I mean, it's not okay, but we know that it's really difficult to solve. So instead of telling you to change all your legacy systems, we found a way to add modern security on top. We basically deploy our solution behind the directory, behind the existing infrastructure, and it becomes almost like a second opinion. So the directory can forward authentications to us, and we can trigger security controls like multi-factor authentication. As an example, right? So in my earlier example, I'm trying to run PowerShell, remote PowerShell on a server, and authentication goes to Active Directory in the backend. It's being forwarded to our integration to Silverfort, and Silverfort can trigger MFA out of band. Once we confirm that, we can actually tell the legacy system to continue with its legacy authentication. So that's how we insert modern security from behind the scenes. In a similar way, we can protect privileged access. We can allow or deny access based on what we want. So it's like a firewall for your authentications in a way. And we can even protect service accounts. We can make sure that service accounts can only be used where they need to be used. So we learn what are they doing, we learn where they're coming from and to, and we start to gradually lock them down to only be able to be used there. If somebody's trying to use them anywhere else, they will just fail, and you'll get an alert about it. Once we apply these controls, and these are just a few examples, we basically release the legacy authentication back to the legacy directory, and from there to the client or the server. So your system still think that it's doing legacy authentication. It still think that it's using NTLM or Kerberos or LDAP. But actually, it's now secure because behind the scenes, we added an Entra sign-in to make sure that it's really you before telling the directory to let it in. And of course, we can share all the data with your SIEM, with your XDR. There's a lot of data here. It's actually pretty valuable. In a similar way to what I showed you earlier with MFA, we can protect non-human identities, service accounts, but of course, they can't do MFA, right? They can't click on the button. But we do have an approach for that too. I'm not going to go deep into it, but this is just a screenshot from there where you can map all your service accounts automatically, where they're being used. This account is being used from these sources to these destinations this many times. And with one click, I can lock it down to only be able to be used here. So even if this is a privileged service account that has domain admin privileges and could cause massive damage to your network if stolen, I will lock it down to only be able to access from A to B, which is where it needs to be used. If anyone will try to access it using it from another place that is not A to B, it will just not be usable. So this concept of virtual fencing, making sure these accounts can only be used where they need to, is pretty powerful. This is part of a bigger platform, of course. I'm not going to go in there today. I'll just say that there's a much bigger platform here where we provide many types of identity security controls. I think it is probably the broadest platform in the market today. We have the biggest companies in the world using it. Many of the Fortune 100 and even Fortune 25 are already using it. Happy to tell you more about it if you want on another time. The last thing I'll say is just a couple of examples from recent data breaches that we've seen. This is the last thing. We've seen recently a lot of increase in data breaches that involve stolen credentials. One recently was done by Scattered Spider a few months back. It's the group that attacked also MGM and others. This was on a Fortune 500 financial company. What they were able to do is trick a user with social engineering into giving them their password and use that password to go into the network and find other credentials. They found a privileged service account that has domain admin privileges. They then try to use that privileged account to spread in the network and spread ransomware. But because we saw that attempt to move laterally, we just blocked it and it couldn't expand. So we could bring in Mandiant in that case and make sure that it's contained. On another case, we had a nation state attack by, one was by a Russian actor and one was Chinese on big European companies where attackers were trying to move laterally inside the network after coming into employees' laptops. So people brought in laptops into the network, the factory that has already been infected, and tried to move laterally. In one of these cases, they were trying to use NTLM to move between computers, and luckily, the customer was using our authentication firewall to basically say there should never be NTLM between workstations. I mean, you may have some servers where you cannot get rid of it, unfortunately, but I never want to see NTLM between workstations. There's no reason for that. So by having this simple policy that prevented that, they completely prevented the attacker from spreading in the network and triggered all the alerts. So that's it. I would love to answer questions if you have a few minutes. I'll say that if you want to contact us, we have offices around the world. We have again many customers around the world. And happy to answer any questions, or of course you can contact me to learn more if you want.
Ed, I really love those last couple of stories. We have a few questions that came through from folks who are attending this session. So Kelly asks, hello, Ed. How do you recommend addressing the identity security risks posed by shadow IT and undocumented service accounts and legacy systems?
Great question. So I'll talk about service accounts specifically, and then I'll try to address it also a little more generally. We are seeing in many companies that the majority of service accounts are not even known to the company. And the reason is that they were created many years ago, or they were created by someone who left, or they are not an official service accounts. That's the worst problem. So somebody gave his personal account to run some application or scheduled task, right? So we see this account called Jim that is actually running some application, some process. You would never find that without looking at the actual behavior of the account, because the account looks like a regular user. And it happens so much because people don't want to go to IT and ask to create a dedicated service account. They just say, hey, just let me just use my personal credential. Funny story, we were deploying our product in a customer environment, and in the process of deploying our product, we need a service account. We need a regular domain user, no special privileges service account just to read from AD. And we said, okay, we need to create this service account as part of our installation process. And the guy just said, oh no, just use my account for that. And it's like, you brought us in to fix this problem. Like you brought us in to fix this very problem. It's like people can't help it because it's such a habit, right? So that happens so much, and we actually find these by looking at the behavior. So what we do is we look at all the authentications going to AD, and we look for machine-like behavior. We use machine learning for that. So if we see something that looks like a pattern, it just connects every certain time frame, and it doesn't sleep at night, and it doesn't rest in the weekend, and it's just doing this automated thing, then even if the account is called Jim, we will tell you there's something automated happening here. Go check why this person is abusing his own account. By the way, we also see the same, the opposite case where a service account, an actual service account, is being used by a human. You suddenly see an interactive login from this account because a human is actually using it because he's too lazy to ask for the privileges. It's just, he knows the password of this account and he's just going to use it for his own purposes. People are doing these types of things all the time. So our product actually finds all of these automatically and classifies them to these groups. That alone helps a lot in cleaning some of the attack surface. I'll just add that more generally, shadow IT is a huge problem and it has different ways to address in different areas. So I talk a lot today about legacy and about service accounts, but I have a lot to say also about the same in the cloud. So if you're interested, just reach out to me and we'll have a conversation about the other areas of the network.
Thank you, Ed. Hey, we've got several other questions, so maybe we can try to get through all of these 4 more questions in the
Okay,
less than 10 minutes that we have. So we have a question from Trupti. How do you balance the need for security with the operational challenges of modernizing or replacing legacy systems?
so how do I balance the need for security with the need to modernize the systems, is the question?
Yeah, with the operational challenges of
Yes.
modernizing or replacing legacy systems.
So what we invented here, and this is really the unique thing about our technology, is that we can protect systems without modernizing them at all. So if you have a legacy system that uses a legacy protocol, we don't need you to touch it at all. You don't need to modify it. You don't need to install anything on it. You don't need to change the code. We've been called by enterprises that had thousands of applications that they couldn't modernize. And by just putting Silverfort behind their directory, we could intercept all those legacy authentications and just send them to Azure, to Entra, or to Okta, or to Ping, or to a FIDO token. So basically add the protection without modernizing the application. You can almost think about us as a translator between the legacy authentication protocols and SAML, the modern authentication protocols. We're like the translator in between. We can let you connect the legacy systems to the cloud identity, to the modern protection. But of course, you have other reasons to modernize your applications. So you may want to still modernize them over time. What we at least help with is we help that during this process, you're covered from a security perspective so that you're under a little less pressure to do it. So we'll get you covered. By the way, we also protect the cloud, right? So I talk about legacy today. We also protect all the cloud assets. It allows you to just move applications slowly while enjoying the same protection in both environments so that, you may have other reasons to modernize, but security is finally not one of them because you are covered in that aspect.
Yeah, that's a
That's just
great
up
answer.
front, and I can even say that we have customers that brought us in to protect even their mainframe, just so that you understand how far it goes.
Yeah, that's a great point. So kind of taking some of the heat off from a security perspective by
Exactly.
improving the security controls in legacy systems. The next question we had was, what steps can organizations take to identify and mitigate identity security risks in legacy systems that can't be easily upgraded?
So as I said, one of the things that we can do is we can plug into the backend of the directory and we can add security controls like multi-factor authentication, which I think adds a lot of security just by applying that, right, into your legacy systems. Protection of privileged access. Okay, so if a privileged user is trying to log in, make sure that they only get, to access just in time and just from where they need to. ITDR, for those who don't know, that's identity threat detection and response. That's all about identifying anomalies and threats and attacks that are happening and responding to them. So these are a few of the examples of the kind of security that you can add. And again, we can add that to any legacy system, not only applications, but also servers, databases, IT and OT infrastructure, hypervisors, file systems, command line interfaces, and of course, applications and endpoints. So pretty much any type of legacy asset, don't just think applications, which is a part of the problem, but I've seen too many companies focus only on their applications and then somebody just spreads between all the actual machines. So don't just think applications, think also servers and endpoints. So we can add all this missing security to all of them. And again, to my earlier point, it doesn't mean that you will not want to gradually replace those with modern systems, but security will not become the reason, because we will bring you the exact same security that you get in the cloud. So the exact same security controls that you get from Entra or Okta in the cloud will now be available to your legacy systems. Imagine logging into a legacy system with your Okta, with your Entra ID, and with their MFA, their modern MFA methods everywhere, even to your legacy infrastructure. We have people logging into medical devices in a hospital or manufacturing systems in some of the biggest manufacturing companies in the world with their Entra identity, which was never possible before, right? So it is now possible, and I think this is going to help a lot in solving some of the blind spots that the industry left behind as we move to the cloud.
And we only have a couple more minutes. We're getting great participation in terms of the Q&A, and I encourage folks to keep posting questions. Ed, I'll ask that you go out after we start the next session to answer some of these questions, maybe share your contact information. Someone asked about the technical dependencies for Silverfort. Then there was a follow-up from Deepak who brought up the point that you made about OT networks, which are sometimes air-gapped or firewalled, don't have full-time internet access. So how do you make MFA work in a scenario like that?
Okay, so I'll address these one by one. So to the first thing you said, my contact information is on the screen. Feel free to copy. This is my email. You can email me directly if you want, or you can go to our website, whatever you prefer, and happy to answer more questions after this. To your next question about the dependencies, so Silverbolt can be deployed either on-prem or in the cloud. Okay, on-prem meaning virtual machines, or in the cloud. And in order to deploy it, what you need is to deploy those virtual machines or connect to our cloud service. And you need to have one of the identity providers that we know how to integrate with. And those are Active Directory, ADFS, Entra ID, Okta, Ping. We cover Radius. We cover local Windows login, to your machines if you're on an airplane, for example, and you don't have network access. And now, within a few months, we're going to have all the remaining cloud assets, meaning AWS, Google, OneLogin, and so on. Including, by the way, also the SaaS applications, even if you don't have an identity provider, even if you just have identities in your SaaS apps. So we are, I think, the closest in the market, I'll say, to have full coverage end to end to all your identity infrastructure and bring security everywhere, from the cloud to the dark corners of the on-prem, right? And we keep adding more in both directions in order to cover even the long tail of all these other things. But that's all you need. You just need to have one of these systems. I mean, many people have AD, many people have like an Entra or an Okta or Radius, so you need to have one of these things that we support. And if you have that, within a few hours, we can get you deployed and get you all that value that I showed. Again, happy to give you like a free trial if you want, and show you how it works. To your next, I guess, last question, about OT and air-gapped networks. We have a way to deploy our virtual machines. That's obviously the on-prem option of our product deployment. We can deploy those virtual machines even in an air-gapped network where there is no internet at all. So you deploy the virtual machine connects to your directory. Okay, so you do need to have something there like an AD or some other directory in that environment. That is a requirement. And once we connect, we can see all the authentications in this OT network without having to talk to the cloud at all. So no data goes out of your network. Nothing needs to go out. It's all happening. All the protection is happening inside the OT environment. I can tell you that we have the biggest companies in the world. I mean, we have Fortune 25 manufacturing companies, the biggest that are using the product even in the OT environment. The biggest mining companies in the world, the biggest oil and gas companies are using this product, and obviously many, many small organizations too. So, contact us and we'd love to show you how this can be deployed in an OT environment. I think that it's probably the only way that I know today to protect, OT networks with secure authentication, and meet some of the regulatory requirements that are out there now. So contact us and we'll tell you more.
Thank you very much, Ed.
Yeah,
I
of
think
course.
we're gonna have to call it for questions for now to keep things moving. But if you wouldn't mind going out to the Q&A console and you have the ability to answer those questions, if there's any more follow-up needed, etc. But thank you very much for your time today, Ed. Very informative session.
Thank you very much, Jim. Always a pleasure. I'll look at the Q&A. I invite everyone to contact me or my team if you want to see more. And thank you very much for inviting me today. And thank you for everyone on the call for wanting to learn more about identity security. I think identity security is becoming the last line of defense, in many companies. And kudos to everyone here who invests in it. And have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, Ed. Yeah, folks, Ed is very much a thought leader in the space, so definitely encourage you to reach out to him. Now, our next session is led by Mark Cox, AVP of Strategic Advisory Services at Fisher Identity. Mark brings over 30 years of experience in information technology, including more than 11 years dedicated to identity management. His deep expertise in designing, implementing, and managing complex IT solutions has made him a recognized leader in the field. Mark has held leadership positions at several R1 higher education institutions and was instrumental at the University of Virginia in aligning IAM strategies to provide immediate automated access to centralized IT systems using Fisher Identity solutions. Today, Mark will present a session on the top challenges businesses face within their identity management programs, and he'll share insights into how these challenges can be solved with the Fisher Identity team's approach. Please join me in welcoming Mark Cox. Mark?
Thank you, Jim. Thank you for the invitation and the large attendance here. It's great to see. Sure, today we want to talk a little bit about our top challenges in identity and access management. So let me grab this PowerPoint and pop this up. Okay, everyone got it? Okay, great. So a little bit about Fisher Identity. Fisher International was founded in 1982 by Addison Fisher. Some of the founding processes that are out there in the the World Wide Web and the internet we still see today. VeriSign and some of these big RSA data security processes. The Fisher Identity product was kind of spun off in 2005 and first introduced and trademarked identity as a service in 2007. From that point forward, we've kind of grown into this space. Most of the customers are higher education customers, which have some of the most complex identity and access management scenarios. Eventually, the highest implementation success rate for us come along, and we have a 97% customer retention rate. So that's a little bit about Fisher. Jim, you shared some information about myself, so thank you for that. And jumping right into the agenda. So the top challenges. So, this is going to assume that you've established governance, you've established partnerships, you've communicated this value of this product and this program, and you've obtained all your executive buy-in and your business line buy-in to get to this identity agenda. And so, kind of what are these top challenges once we kind of get past those initial project phases? And it's more about defining the source system. What does that mean? Are there more than one? Timely onboarding and offboarding. A lot of companies and educational institutions can't really onboard folks very quickly. It could take a week, from this time that they're hired. And then how do we provision this access, and how, more importantly, do we deprovision this access as the join, leave, move process is happening for these people? And then how do we actually manage that whole life cycle? This life cycle of your people as they come and go and return, and and maybe even need some access beyond, in a retirement role perhaps. And so how do we do that? And of course, we can do that with the Fisher solution. So what are these source systems? Well, the source system should always be your source system of record or authoritative system for your identity data. For companies, that might be your HR system, your HCM system. Maybe it's Workday, it's SAP. Lots of different systems there, Oracle, PeopleSoft, on and on and on. You could also, as higher education, have student information systems and all those products that manage the students. Or you could have a non-employee management system for those contractors, or those people that aren't provided a W-2, but instead get a 1099. So how are they managed, and how do you onboard them into your organization? So this onboarding and offboarding process. So what does it mean to onboard someone cleanly, fast, efficiently? So they're going to go through some sort of identity claim process to get this access into your systems. That's maybe some sort of wizard-based password management enrollment, an MFA device enrollment, maybe even managing some pieces of their profile that might be best managed in your identity solution, such as preferred names or pronouns that maybe your HR system or your source of authority does not accommodate. Or if you have multiple systems, maybe you said, let's make it a one-stop shop for our employees that they manage this data in the identity system, which then is replicated back out to those source systems, such as preferred name. And then offboarding, the timely account disablement or deletion, if that's what you do at your organization. Grace period management. So what are grace periods? Well, maybe on hire or even on offboarding, you give certain roles of people, a day or two or a week past or early access to your systems. For this soft offboarding, maybe you've got someone that's worked there 30 years and you know that they've tied their bank account to their employee work email account. So you're going to give them this soft offboarding to find all those things and disconnect. Maybe you scramble your passwords on offboarding so that folks can't reaccess or get back in. Maybe you disable your MFA tools. And then maybe you automate all your deprovisioning out. And so you either disable or you delete in all your target and your source systems. And so it helps manage all those pieces of the pie, if you will. So your automated provisioning. So you want to make sure that your identity access management tool can actually provision by creating accounts in these centralized systems. Maybe it's Zoom, maybe it's some central email O365 process. So you want to make sure that your tools are well positioned to be able to do that for you. Birthright provisioning, maybe all people, all employees, this definition of all, get some access in some system at some level. You should be able to build policies, rules. You should be able to manage all the attributes that are effectively used perhaps later on in the authorization and authentication processes. And you should be able to manage all of these complex roles and the assignments and the grace periods, multiple roles per person if need be. On the backside of this, with the deprovisioning, again, undoing those things or managing those roles or managing that life cycle. Or maybe it's the birthright provision remains, but you automatically deprovision some system. So it's all the rules that you need to set up and manage and think about in this process. So your connected systems. So once you determine what these connected systems are, you want to make sure that your identity product has native connectivities into that system. The benefits of that are that you do not need an intermediary system or connection. You don't need to know any special APIs. You don't have to have these integration knowledges to connect to and manage from that system. And as of fall of this year, the Fisher solution has 86 defined connected systems that we can connect to natively, which is really cool. Onboarding provisioning. So you want your system to be fully configurable for your organization. You don't want it to be a cookie cutter solution that you have to change your business rules to accommodate. The product should be configurable and you should allow the product, to configure to accommodate your business processes if they're best practices. So you're going to have this live data integration for immediate actions. You get an immediate hire. As soon as that person's hired, they get their access. They get their welcome email. They claim their account within minutes. You should be able to set up rules based on account creation and data management. Policies, password management enforcement. Maybe it's password management enforcement based on role or some attribute of these people that are your employees. Maybe they don't have to set their password but once a year. Maybe you want them to reset the password every 14 days, and you can build rules around that. You also want your employees and your users to be able to enroll in and manage their MFA in a seamless fashion without having to jump around and go other places to do those things. And so all of this allows full business-driven processes. And that's really the goal here. And so just an example there at the bottom, you get this employee that's hired really quick and they can onboard and it's all automated and it happens as designed as you've designed this policy and this access happens. That's ultimately the goal for quick onboarding and provisioning of access. Deprovisioning. Same way, backwards, kind of undo these things and undo these things in a logical, meaningful way, because you might have some scenarios that you act upon the role of that person differently for the access to the system, or maybe it's for the management of that attribute for that person to be a little differently. And supporting grace roles, allowing different timed events and actions. Again, working with the business and understanding what HR needs or what the department needs to happen in this offboarding and deprovisioning scenario. And what we run into quite often is, especially in higher education, is that of retirees. Retirees often get to keep their access forever. And quite often, they want some process that's a yearly renewal for that retiree access, just to ensure that, you know, they're still around and they still want this access. And so making sure that your system can accommodate those highly complex scenarios and then mix and match that with potential other roles that may come on for that retiree. Maybe they come back part-time. Maybe they come back as a volunteer. Whatever that might be in your organization, how do you manage that? How do you stay on top of that in a good, true governance fashion? And as you're kind of seeing here, the onboarding and the provisioning of access is really, really similar. So is the offboarding and the deprovisioning of access. And so the Fisher Identity Solution functions as a holistic governance platform that's going to integrate the policies, the orchestration, processing, and consumption of this source data. That ensures, you know, that all of your IT systems access is controlled, it's audible, it's performed in an agile, controlled fashion. You don't have to wait on some report from HR to enter some person manually in some system so they can log on next week when they arrive. You know, so again, the goal of all of this is governance and auditable actions so that it's cleanly controlled. And this is all your identity governance that's right underneath your identity and access management policies, which then ties back into some of the screens that you saw a few minutes ago from Silverfort, where identity solutions was there in the center. So lifecycle management. So this is a really simplified diagram. But as I've mentioned in this presentation, some of these roles and some of these actions can be very, very complex, especially when you start mixing different types of people with additional roles, additional jobs, and so forth. And so you're always going to have this kind of this circular, always watching, monitoring process. You might just have an attribute change in one of your employees. That attribute change, however simple that might be, can be as simple as a department number change that could change access in the identity and access management models and all the way up through the Silverfort access. So you want to make sure that you've got good lifecycle management and good controls, and you've highly engaged the business on all of these processes. It's very, very important that IT doesn't try to configure and manage your IGA solution and your IAM solution kind of in this sheltered view without engaging the business and all of your the folks around that, you know, should be involved with this. So again, full identity governance, all the way from onboarding to offboarding and everything in between. Lots of things are mentioned here, lots and lots of complex identity processes that are there. But again, it's really making sure that you have engaged all of your stakeholders and obtaining buy-in to make these things happen. The more front-end work you do, the smoother the process will be and the happier everybody will be in the end. Okay, so that's pretty much it. So identity and access management, kind of some of the pain points, all of the hard work that's involved, and what kind of questions do we have?
Thanks, Mark. We've got a couple of questions that came through. I just wanted to say, I've been familiar with the Fisher Identity Suite for a long time. For some people, it may be the first time hearing about it. I think it's a solution that folks should take a look at. And if they're in the market thinking about a new IGA platform, consider Fisher, at least take a look. I really like the front end is snazzy, looks like almost any software as a service application you see today. But the back end has a lot of capabilities in terms of making things, you know, more customizable. So really that is, in my opinion, the difference today is like one end of the spectrum is here's a set of best practices. You have no choice but to follow them. The other end is have it, what do they say at Burger King? Make it your way. And then there's anywhere in between, but you have to figure out where you are on the spectrum and then figure out what solution is the right fit for your organization. So I'll get off my soapbox and I'm going to turn this back to our esteemed attendees. They submitted several questions, and Jacob asks, what is the most significant challenge you have seen organizations face when transforming to an automated IAM system, and how do you help ease that transition?
I wouldn't say it's engagement of leadership at the highest levels. You have to make sure that you've engaged and obtained buy-in from your vice president of HR even. They have to understand and they have to get the right people engaged, because you're now building automation, business rules, and capabilities on their data. And that could be the first time for them. And so, suddenly, if a name is typed in all caps, it could come through all the systems in all caps and they don't like it and they want it fixed. HR has got to be involved in that because that's the source system. That's where that data is coming from. Maybe there's a typo in the department name or a typo in the department number. We're now building automation off of that data. So they have to be very, very careful, and they have to be engaged, and they have to understand what that means. I'll say that one scenario that I've come across that was somewhat comical, but very meaningful, was that there was an organization that, as they did job changes, so they moved people from one area to another, changed their departments, or whatever that is, they would do it at 11 a.m. before lunch at 12. And so they would go in and take out all these job assignments for these people, go to lunch, come back at 1 o'clock, and then start putting them all back in. With a live data integration, maybe your business rule says if you don't have a job, you don't have access. And so that's the case that happened there. And those 15 people lost access over the lunch hour. Nobody understood what happened, but suddenly by the time they called the help desk and got a ticket back in at 1 or 1:30, their access was back. And that was a weird blip. With some, good folks at the helm, they understand that, and they understand, that they can, address their business process.
Mark, I love that you talked about university challenges, because that's where you see the edge cases come to real life, right? I worked
Yep.
with the university where they said the product they implemented had a 2-character minimum for last name, and then they had a student register who had a 1-letter last name. So, they're you talk about these edge cases, there is a scenario where those actually pop up. Our next question is, given that many organizations face delayed offboarding processes, what steps does Fisher Identity take to ensure that account disablement or deletion is executed immediately upon separation?
Yep. So there's 2 scenarios there. One is, as I spoke to in the last question, making sure that HR leadership and all the business units are involved. So they know that until they click that terminate button or they put that date in, in Workday HR to terminate that position, that access will remain. The really cool thing about Fisher is that it's a no-code solution. So it's all about configuration. And there's all these configurations that you can set up to address these such scenarios. One of those scenarios comes up quite often, and that was the one that you just asked about. And the Fisher solution can have a portal for HR to log into the identity system with somewhat admin capabilities defined for HR for early access. So maybe you need to access an executive early, kind of override that hire date, and make it immediate. So it's auditable. HR logged in. HR should have a support ticket. HR is tracking that. On the other side of that is, forced exit scenario. HR has been made aware. They don't want to put the termination in the HR system yet because they want to finish that last payroll or whatever that might be. They can log into the Fisher Identity solution and turn off that access. So basically remove that staff role or whatever that might be through an audible process that HR can, you're empowering your departments to be able to do that.
That's great, Mark. Hey, we are coming up on the time for session 2. Mark, if you would go out to the Q&A panel, you have several good questions. I do have to tip my cap to Tiana, who said it sounds horrible engaging HR and having to have them understand the downstream effect is crucial. I mean, this is a practitioner. This is somebody who has dirt under their fingernails, I'll say. But yeah, if you get a chance to get out there and just respond to some of those comments, maybe share your contact information, that would be fantastic.
Sure enough. Thank you all. Appreciate the time.
Thank you, Mark. So we're going to shift on to our third session now, which is our panel discussion. And depending on where you are in the world, I'd say good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Our panel discussion is on navigating IAM in a cloud-first world. As IAM becomes more complex in today's increasingly cloud-based environments, it's crucial to address the key challenges and explore best practices. Today, we're fortunate to have a fantastic panel of experts to share their insights on how businesses can navigate identity and access management in the cloud-first era. First, let me introduce our distinguished panelists. We have Sumit Kulkarni. He's the Senior Manager of IAM at Ultragenics. Anuba Gar, who is the Executive Director of Platform Engineering at Quest Diagnostics. Kat Dillon is the Manager of Identity and Access Management at Avanade. I got that right. We have Tariq Ahmed. He's the SVP for Information Security Program at First United Bank. And Ali Saburi, an Identity and Access Management Leader. Thank you all for being here. And I'd like to ask you each to take your turn to briefly introduce yourselves and share a bit about your background and your current role in IAM. And let's start with Sumit.
Hello, hi Jim. Thank you for inviting me. Yeah, I've been working in this space for the last 20 years now, and successfully implementing in various industries like security, all identity solutions in various industries like enterprise, then aviation, financial, healthcare, and now I'm working with the pharmaceutical. But I've been instrumenting in implementing the hybrid solutions or migrating the solutions from the on-prem to the cloud-first solutions, utilizing the zero trust models, implementing or improving the security postures for the organizations, aligning with the business objectives. And for last 20 years, I've been working with different clients, providing the services to different customers, how to improvise their identity solutions, how to secure their identity solutions, what are the challenges that they have been having or facing in the industries in the security from the identity perspective, of course, and helping them to smoothly and seamlessly improve their identity security as well as migrating to the solutions to the cloud first environment.
Thank you, Sumit. Anuba?
Hi, my name is Anubha Gaur, and I am leading the DevSecOps, SREs, release engineering, and then quality engineering functions. And my background is started as a software engineer. So I worked building the engineering team, and then work on this side of the work as a developer organizations, and then the DevSecOps, and then cloud migrations. And I am very strong partner with the security team. So I am, as I see this topic is coming up, I was so excited because I would like to share the challenges because I'm leading the cloud migrations, because most of the companies, especially healthcare, is transforming to cloud. And then what the challenges are in, identity access management is a crucial part. So partnering, my team is working with the security team, building and automating the solution. So more as a seamless user experience. So that is a great topic, and I'm very excited to be part of this panel.
Thanks, Anuba. I'm a customer of yours, so good to see you here. Kat.
Hello. Thanks for the invite. Excited to be here. My name is Kat Dillon. I'm a manager of identity and access management at Avanade, which is a leading cybersecurity firm. In my role, I do architect and solution, oversee some strategies and solutions that are just focused on securing identities and controlling access in complex environments, both in the cloud and on-prem. So my team and I are really focused on implementing those solutions, following zero trust frameworks, least privilege access to help organizations control their critical assets and identities, reduce risk, and enhance that user experience. So I have been in the industry for over 4 years now, with a strong background in business administration and entrepreneurship. So a pretty unique combo there of business and cybersecurity. So happy to be here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kat. And I guess we can take it you are based in San Francisco.
I'm actually based out of Big Bear Lake in Southern California.
Okay.
Close,
Okay.
but I love the bridge. I think it's beautiful.
It's a beautiful bridge. Tarek.
Hi, I've served as sort of a information security and data protection leader, primarily focused on financial services through the bulk of my career. So kind of took a different route into this space, primarily through risk and audit. I've led various risk competencies over the years, including information security programs, privacy audit, as I mentioned, regulatory compliance. In the financial services space, that's kind of had me, shift my focus on security, business enablement, and really weaving security into the fabric of customer-oriented solutions, and of course, safeguarding those capabilities and really focusing on long-term enterprise value. So it's really striking that delicate balance between speed to market and secure solutions. And I really just enjoyed working in the IAM space and with the variety of different tools and capabilities over the years, because it really does support that speed to market and enablement aspect, especially when you're thinking about how everything's gone mobile and the implications to reaching your customers and facilitating transactions in a seamless fashion. I'm really excited to be here today to discuss this interesting topic with this accomplished panel. Thank you.
Thanks, Tarek. Sounds like a really important perspective. Ali.
Hello, folks. Ali Saburi here. Also sporting the San Francisco Bay Bridge in my background. There's 3 of us now. I've been in the IAM space for close to a decade now. Started off my career similar to Anuba in the software development world. Fell in love with IAM because I love software. I love, cybersecurity, and ended up in a very, client-facing role. I've worked for predominantly very large consulting firms, and my clients have been large federal agencies and/or large commercial organizations, predominantly banks and healthcare. So I think what really made me very happy about this particular panel is a lot of the topics that we're going to be discussing are when you have a very old, large tech savvy company, the old part becomes like a crux to them because they had very strong capabilities in cloud, and then they went to multi-cloud and whatnot, and then now they're stuck with identities everywhere. So this is a very exciting topic for me because I've dealt with it so much, and I want to hear everyone else's perspective on this as well.
Right, great. Thanks, Ali. So the way we're going to do the panel is I'll bring up a question, a topic. I'll make a statement, then ask a question. I'll I'm going to identify, who the question is targeted to first. So let's start with Sumit. IAM has become increasingly complex with the shift to cloud environments. From your experience, what do you see as the biggest challenge organizations face when it comes to managing identities in the cloud?
Yeah, I think so. As Mark has already mentioned from the Fisher, there are a lot of factors, there are challenges that we are having, but the biggest challenges that managing the identities in the cloud is handling the scale and granularity of the permissions that we maintain to maintain the secure and efficient access controls. That is the foremost. And before that, also, what I feel is like what I've experienced in different organizations is like, how do you buy in or how do you align the policies, your security policies, with the organization policies? A lot of times what happens is like there are a lot of discrepancies, there are a lot of differences between the policies, and that's where it doesn't match to design the solutions or to maintain those identity solutions and make it secure. But that is the one of the most important. But there are several factors like lack of centralized control, or there are different platforms or different applications that we try to integrate with the IDP solutions or the cloud platforms, and where we see there are no RBAC policies, there are no contextual or attribute policies that we have configured. Then there are scalable environments where cloud is highly dynamic and resources can be spam or decommission rapidly, right? So IAM policy must adapt in the real time in these changes. So sometimes what happens is like what I've observed is like we have provided, or the organization has provided, overprivileged accounts or permissions to some of the service accounts or some of the user accounts that is not accounted for, and that actually is very difficult to manage it, and then it leads to the orphan accounts as well. So a lot of times there is no audit for these securities, audit for the access controls doesn't happen, and that's where it leads to the orphan accounts. Then there is one of the major or main important factor is the rule explosion. What it makes it hard to monitor the access and ensure complex. Like there are, let's say for example, there are different departments or the teams that require custom access across the organization, and it often leads to to the role explosion where we give over permission privileges, or there are no security baselines or policies that are defined across the organization. That also leads to the I'm sorry. That also leads to the role explosion or the policy. Then there are human or machine accounts, or machine accounts leads to the service accounts as well. So those are the challenges that I see most of the times. Even there are compliance like GDPR or GXP systems, where I'm right now currently working with one of the leading pharmaceutical industries where we are GXP compliance. We have to follow the compliance. So there are a lot of compliance policies that we have to configure, and if we don't configure, then it comes into the audit policies. Then it goes into a different altogether a different sector. So there happens like the attackers or the breaches happens with the potential data. And what I think so, to improving all these things, to improve these factors, the first important factor is the least privileges. How can we manage the least privileges? How can we improve the GIT access, the just-in-time access? How can we automate the provisioning and deprovisioning, the life cycle management? How we can integrate the SSO, make the user more easily from the user perspective, like how can you make more productivity, like SSO and skim provisioning, then strong authentication with the help of MFA or FIDO or maybe FastPass, and all these options are there to improve the security of the identities and improve the security postures. But these are a couple of challenges that I have observed in various industries and across the industries that I have helped them to improve from the security standards.
Yeah, thank you, Sumit. And, I kind of took from what you said, there's, the goal of how IAM has been done we've been doing it for multiple decades now and applying it to these new platforms. There's some things that, remain true in that new environment, and there are other things that need to evolve. things like least privilege, they continue forward. Thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you.
The next question is for Anuba. So Anuba, in a cloud-first world, automation plays a vital role in managing access controls. What are some of the best practices you've seen when it comes to integrating automation with IAM?
So, I want to add what Sumit was telling, that, he agreed that, the challenges, and that's where the automations plays a critical role. And especially when we are migrating to cloud, and cloud is a multi-cloud, because every cloud provider, they have their own IAM, which brings more complexity. And that's where the challenge comes, that how do we make sure they are following the right set of the policies? We have a consistent view, and then auditing. These are the challenges comes, and that's where automations plays a very crucial role. The number one thing is the human error. If just assuming that, think about it, imagine that all these complex multi-cloud setup, now you have a hybrid, you are in the transitioning steps, and then doing all of this through the manual. So how to ensure the governance is happening? How to ensure that the human error is not, they can make the changes, how to ensure that it's following the right policies, role-based policies, zero trust framework that we design, how to ensure it's actually implementing that. So that's the whole automations is building the foundations to ensuring the policies, auditing, logging, it's actually working, and then aligned to the governance, and then legal and governance requirements, and then risk management team is going to be helpful for them. So different factors, automations is needed. But one thing that I would like to tell you, it should not be after the thought, it should be as you are migrating to the cloud, think about the automations first. And that's you design it. And that's something I've seen, that sometimes they just move on to faster, but not thinking about it, putting some extra efforts than proper budget for the automation efforts. So yes, it's gonna be add one more layer as we are going to the AI, and data is important, but the automation is building the foundations. So major areas, then I can do a deep dive if we, the audience wants to understand any specific area, but the high level automation is building the foundation.
I think one other thing on the whole, starting with the cloud and identity and access management is like, don't we wish we could have built our enterprise identity, from square one. Instead, we had to start with all this legacy and broken process and then try to fix and bolt on as the business is moving 1,000 miles an hour. So it's one of the nice things about cloud is that we get to
Have a
start
dedicated
properly.
team. Yes. Yep. Exactly. Yep.
Great. Our next question is for Kat. Kat, how are businesses today balancing security with the need for the seamless user experience in IAM?
That's a great question. Probably one of my favorite questions because it varies so widely based on the business and what they've chosen to adopt as their change management strategies. So really, I view this balance between security and user experience as a gray line. It really can go black or white depending on how organizations decide to educate their users about the security that's being implemented in the organization and what it means to them in their role. I have been a part of a lot of organizational adoptions of more enhanced identity security. And my recommendation is always to implement some change management or end user training. And often I will work with the clients directly to be able to say, here's what we can do to educate these people that may not know anything about security or be tech people at all. So I experience that a lot with smaller and larger organizations, really working with the team to ensure that there is that security to protect user identities, because that really is, users are the weakest link in the business. And protecting those identities can really protect the organization. And educating users on why I've seen leads to a lot more adoption rather than, calls to the center asking for assistance with logging in because they don't know how to utilize MFA. I actually just was up here. I'm up in Big Bear Lake, and I was having a conversation with someone at one of the ski resorts, and they recently rolled out a Workday platform, and there was no education to go along with that. So they had a lot of their users, their employees who were older, who had, not had as much experience with the technology, having a lot of concerns about it. And I think that can be easily prevented by, working with your employees directly and having some of that change management. I've seen a lot of single sign-on. I've seen a lot of MFA, and really having some monitoring of locations and behaviors so that the sign-in process can be adaptive to specific users. Are they high risk or are they low risk? Where are they located? What do their behaviors look like? And then passwordless is a great option to kind of ease that process for users to sign in. Taking away that need to memorize multiple complex passwords for multiple different systems. I personally don't want to have to remember them all, so it's great for me, and I'm sure it's great for all users as well. So those are just, what I've been seeing, small and large organizations alike, kind of balancing that end user experience and security through that change management process and education.
Yeah, I mentioned that I've been in this industry for 20 years, which dates me a little bit, I guess. But I remember in my early days in the industry, the idea was have a great user experience for your customer IAM, but employees, they're going to need to use whatever we give them. The problem is employees are people too. They get confused if you don't have intuitive systems, and they may be providing customer support, or they may be undermining your security efforts inadvertently if they don't understand or you're overwhelming them with identity and access management that doesn't make sense. All right, great. So the next question is for Tarek. Tarek, how can organizations ensure compliance with evolving regulations such as GDPR and CCPA while scaling their IAM systems globally?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jim. And I mentioned in the introduction that, I've been working in financial services, so this is kind of near and dear to me, right? It's a highly regulated industry. First off, I just highlight that, when we're talking about managing identities in the cloud environment holistically, it's no longer about protecting the perimeter, right? This is about securing each identity, each access point throughout the cloud infrastructure. And so, when you think about tools and capabilities and controls, there's a large push for automation. And, I've seen kind of all permutations of, manual capabilities to semi-automated to fully automated. I know there were a couple points already made in respect to, auto deprovisioning, et cetera. And those are all great, right? Because I think, I'd say from my point of view, controls and capabilities are emphasized. Regulators want to see how you're complying with those prescribed parameters that have been set forth in, say, a GDPR, CCPA, or even some of the industry-specific regulations. And so I kind of think about it, across a couple different aspects. One, you can take more of a unified policy management approach. This will align your tools with your cloud environment and maintain more of like a stringent security policy construct. That'll help you ensure compliance. And to really achieve that, you kind of have to factor in a couple different aspects. One, I think you need strategic selection of your security tools. That'll ensure you've got more of a robust and adaptable construct within your cloud architecture. Two, I think you need to also ensure more of like a comprehensive visibility of all the activities and users and machines so that you've got policy enforcement that's uniform, it's well monitored, it's well maintained, right? And that'll enhance your overall organizational security posture and compliance integrity. And that's kind of really the substantiation, right? Especially when you get into talking about, regulatory compliance and really being able to evidence that you're hitting the mark, and you can demonstrate that, especially again in my space. That's that's a lot of what we do on a day-to-day management standpoint to make sure that we're ready for those types of evaluations. And then I would also highlight that regular security and compliance audits, of course, what you formulate as an organization to provide for oversight and assessment that informs the effectiveness of your IAM and cloud security integration, that'll really help you uphold your compliance through those ongoing assessments, right? And having that feedback loop. And then through the execution of audits and vulnerability identification, and that'll inform, obviously the modifications you might need to make from a security protocol or tool or practice standpoint. And so, because you don't really want to just solely rely on, your controls and capabilities to give you more of a reactive or detective, but you want to start to get into more proactive stance and have more preventable control measures to confront, the present and future obstacles.
Mark, do you feel like the regulatory environment is moving ahead faster than you can keep up with, or is it the opposite or somewhere in between, right? Is this like a slam dunk layup, or is it things are moving so fast that, not only us, but the industry is having a hard time keeping up?
We've seen a mixed bag, right? From a banking standpoint, financial services here in the US, it feels like there's been some rollback. There was a time back in 2016 where there was an advance notice of proposed rulemaking for cyber risk standards for large financial institutions that never took root. But it provided a really solid framework for all of these types of very critical aspects that we're talking about today. I would say the states have individually stepped up their measures to protect their citizens in lieu of having more of a comprehensive, oversight requirement, right? And so then you find yourself kind of navigating international, regional, national type laws
State by state.
and trying to maintain compliance with all of them, right? As opposed to having maybe more of an overarching approach, which used to be the case back in the day when you looked at like Basel 1 and 2 and some of those other measures from at least from a financial services standpoint.
Right. Great input. All right, my last question is for Ali. So Ali, with IAM systems becoming more decentralized, so in other words, you could have a different IAM system for PAM, IGA, authentication, you name it. And largely that's due to cloud environments. How do organizations maintain control and visibility over their entire identity infrastructure?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a great question. It has a bit of a qualifier, so I think I need to explain for some of the folks what the question kind of means. The reason why it's decentralized or IAM systems or identities start getting access to things post authentication, which we call authorization. Cloud environments have made it very difficult for identity providers to receive and give access to nitty-gritty things, which again we call that authorization. AWS, GCP, Azure, all of them have a front door which your IDP will authenticate you into, and then the expectation is that through the back door they'll figure out where you have to be, what access you should be granted. Someone has to go in and give you this and that. There's some authorization components that are based off of your locale, your other attributes. This makes it very difficult from a governance standpoint, specifically from an identity governance standpoint, to read in all this material and know what type of access someone has. So I think the question is really, how do you fix that problem? I think there's multiple avenues, and you could use a multitude of these options, but I think one of the best ways is to take over some of that authorization, authentication component in your identity provider system. So you do that at the identity provider level and not at the endpoint level, whether it's, again, AWS, Azure, etc. Those are very important because when you have administrators going into AWS or Azure and administering access to someone, the IDP is not going to see that. The governance tool is not going to see that. So you want to be able to take control of that and bring the control of giving access and receiving data through that centralized system. So again, to kind of qualify the question, is to re-centralize things back into the center. The next avenue would be to use the tools provided by the more modern updates of these platforms, like Entra ID, which used to be called Azure AD. I'm older in the identity world, so I still call it Azure AD. But Entra ID's new features includes a lot of that. AWS has similar identity tooling that allows you to give back control, again, to IDPs. It also allows you to keep the control on the platform side from an identity perspective, but give good reporting back. So that type of relationship is very important between your identity provider and your platform. Building that is kind of where you need kind of a, someone like me, like a solutions implementer, to come in and figure out where the gaps are and build that solution. There's no cookie cutter way of making this work. It's kind of based on how many different cloud platforms you have, where your identities sit, how strong is your governance currently, how strong is your IDP currently. But at the end of the day, it's just a combination of, again, utilizing tools at the level that they should be, and also being able to use tools and reporting from every single endpoint. And again, this kind of rolls out of the strict IAM and into more of the zero trust. You need to have the data on every single access of every single person at every single time. That's what the zero trust question is always about, is maybe I don't have that information, maybe I don't need it, but maybe I can do this decision making at an endpoint level, at a network level, at a like a MDM level, which is like for mobile management. But all these different factors now come into play, which, for folks like me and Jim who've been in this world for a little longer, those tools and capabilities and data weren't available to us 10 years ago, but today they are. So if you want to go the traditional route, try to make it more centralized, try to give more control to your identity provider. It's not the wrong way. And if you want to go in the more modern route, move your compliance and security into zero trust, so that you have less reliance on the centralized access, on the centralized identity. Both are great routes. I have clients that are big that take either or both. There's no right or wrong answer. It's just whichever one kind of fits your organization structure best is kind of the route that I would recommend.
Great feedback, Ali. Thank you so much. I wanted to just encourage all the folks who are in attendance on our event today. Please, if you're having questions or you're having thoughts, enter them into the Q&A. The panelists will do their best to multitask and answer questions, or we'll get them and we'll talk through them here in our remaining few minutes. I did want to go into kind of a rapid fire type scenario where I'll ask a question and I'm sure everybody's going to get excited. Here's how I'd like to control traffic. There's a raise the hand feature for our panelists. If you can kind of raise your hand, I'll pick each person. And if you can try to cap your answer to 1 minute to 2 minutes maximum, that way we can get through these topics efficiently. So real world scenarios that businesses often face. So I'm going to paint a scenario and look for you to weigh in with your insights. So the first one, imagine a large enterprise is migrating to a multi-cloud environment and discovers a major security breach due to weak identity management. Several sensitive accounts were compromised. How should the company prioritize its response, and what IAM strategies should they implement to prevent this in the future? So use the raise the hand feature if whoever wants to try to take the first crack at this.
I think
All
I can
right,
start.
great, Anuba, thank you. Sorry, my
Yeah.
vision's not so great. I couldn't see the hand raise.
Yeah, because had the similar experience in one of the enterprise previous my company, the similar thing. So the one thing which I would definitely recommend that understand the impacted accounts first and their accesses. Sometimes over provisioning could be a problem. The first thing first that first understand what those impacted accounts are and what is the actual impact on the business. And then regardless is the identity access management related breach or any other security breach, was one thing is important, have a transparency and communications to the stakeholder and then the business partner, which is very, very important. And that because this is going to help that yes, as the security team, the things are in there, we are working on it. But one of the identity access management, the strategy that we implemented, because we saw that, is it the zero trust framework was, there or not, or managers are regularly accessing the user access or not. So which was not the case in that when we did the analysis, the RCA, we saw that it was every once in a year rather than every quarter. So that is the one strategy implemented that, hey, it's important, then we should do it. The second strategy implemented is the automations, the real-time monitoring. So if any kind of the anomalies or the pattern, especially in the healthcare industry, it's very, think that we have to have the real-time monitoring tools. There are a lot of tools are available, but that is the something that, is it the real-time monitoring there, not there? And then how do we alert the team immediately whenever they see any anomaly or some unusual behavior? And of course, as I said, the automated user lifecycle management, which is the third one that we implemented. Yep.
Great, thank you, Anuba. Sumit, do you have 1 minute to add to that?
No, as whatever Anubhav said, it is correct. Like the only thing is like whatever the response that we have to prioritize or communicate with the stakeholders is like, I would rather isolate. Similar experience I had in my previous organizations where we isolated completely all the accounts that were impacted, and then we started identifying the root cause analysis. And for the short term access, what are the short term solution was like what Anubha mentioned is like we enabled there were some accounts, orphan accounts, which were not having the MFA and strong password. So we removed the access privilege from these accounts, implemented the MFA. And as she mentioned, the zero trust was the key for the long term solutions.
Great, thank you, Sumit. Next scenario. With remote work becoming the norm, a tech company is transitioning to a permanent hybrid model. However, their IAM infrastructure designed for on-premise operations is now outdated and struggling to manage remote access. How should they modernize their IAM to support remote work securely? Ali.
So this is actually all of us professionals went through this in 2020. No matter what we did, this was definitely a top of the line questioning we had in 2020. I think our biggest problem across this was identity vetting. That was and an identity vetting that was propagated into our identity provider as a zero trust component. That solution is available across multiple tools. It's more of a process and architecture orientation. I would, if we had more time, I want to stick to my 1 minute, but basically you want to know the person who's logging in says, they're this person, and you want to confirm that the first time around, which is a little bit more complex of identity vetting, facial scanning, identity, document scanning, all sorts of other things. And then on top of that, every single time they're accessing like a privilege something or something that has any type of privilege or entitlements necessary to get to, you want to double check with things. That could be locale, IP address, MAC address, a whole barrage of things, time of day, and again, these are all part of zero trust identity strategies. So again, we're pulling ourselves out of that strict IAM, traditional IAM, and bringing in the modern zero trust way of building an architecture around this.
MFA, contextual authentication, those are some great
Correct.
ideas.
Yeah.
Kat, you have something to add?
I am still on mute. Yeah, so when it comes to, you know, this idea of the remote work, I think a lot of organizations are really adopting a hybrid approach, you know, implementing identity as a service to integrate the cloud environment and support some of the modern authentication protocols, single sign-on, MFA, as Ali mentioned, and then really just focusing on the partnership between single sign-on and MFA to further enhance the security of the environment.
Awesome, Kat. My third scenario, I'm going to give this right to Tarek. A financial services company conducts an audit and finds that nearly 40% of employees have access to more systems than needed due to year-over-year of over-provisioning. What IAM solutions would address this issue?
Thank you, Jim. Well, so I think, you know, as I mentioned, I tend to kind of take a programmatic kind of governance control oriented approach, right? So I'm always thinking about the different types of tools, right, that can help with managing, you know, and reducing or over provisioning and things of that nature, right? So Pathlock, that's a tool that centralizes IAM. It really provides complete view of user access. And then again, from the governance and control standpoint, it will provide more of a real-time access governance, attribute-based access controls, auditing and reporting capabilities. So you can always keep a pulse on the sprawl, right? And what the implications are to your organization. Zluri is another one. It's a tool that automates employee offboarding. So it'll deactivate user access across applications, which is also obviously very useful in this type of an environment. We, you know, from a financial services standpoint, we have a number of different, you know, functions. And when you think about the data and the, you know, the type of transactions that, you know, these personnel are provided with in terms of the accessibility to such systems and information, we need to have tools like this in place. You know, AWS also has managed services, right? So you can automate change types to provision IAM roles and policies. So I think there's a number of different capabilities out there that can be leveraged that'll also provide you the clarity into managing your access and appropriately relevant to the roles and the data needs of those roles across your organization.
Thanks, Tarek. So,
And if it's
we're
okay,
gonna go.
can I just quickly add? So I think this scenario is really of an organization that either doesn't have a governance tool or they don't know how to use their governance tool, because the governance tools, all of them, SailPoint, Savient, you know, they all have recertification processes, automated recertification campaigns. They have all sorts of joiner, mover, leaver, lifecycle management. So if you're moving from one role to another role and you're just adding roles and forgetting to deprovision roles, all that stuff is built in. It's either they don't have the tool or they haven't set it up and they haven't enforced it. If they don't have the tool, buy it, set it up. You know, if they do have the tool, like, it's just a process thing that you've already paid for it, set it up, enforce it, and you can get rid of the things. But as Tarek mentioned, there's a lot of new tools that are coming out there that can read data across the board and tell you, you know, like who is over provisioned. That's I would say the next step. It's not a preventative measure. It's a, we're already in this state. Let's run this and see what we have. But I think regular cleanup through access recertification through your governance tool is the solution, the easy solution that I've been using for my clients.
Great. Thank you, Ali. All right, so we're going to close things out now. And I wanted to get closing thoughts from each panelist. So as we wrap up, I'd ask each of our panelists to share one final thought, so 1 to 2 minutes maximum, or key takeaway for our audience. So what's the one thing they should keep in mind as they continue to tackle IAM challenges within their own organizations? We'll start with Sumit.
Yeah, thank you. So the key takeaway is like whatever you are implementing as an identity solution, whether it is on-prem or hybrid or just cloud first think about like what are the objectives that we need to implement it, like what are the key important factors that we have to design and implement, whether it is automation, provisioning for the LCM, whether it is SSO, MFO, and whatever it is, like it should be aligning with the objectives of the organization. And then once you have the baseline of the securities that we implemented, the next step should be about what are the priorities what are the different priorities that we can implement it, how to automate the process so that we can improve the securities for the identities. We can make the life easier for the service desk team or different departments, for the HR or for the support team that they are managing the tickets for daily activities and everything. So how can we improve from the security perspective? It should not be the security or the identity management space should not be overburdened. It should not be the hindrance or for the technology or departments. It should help those departments and teams to improve the security and not be the overburden. And the third thing,
Right.
then what are the things that you can make improvement in your life cycle? So security is a continuous process. It is not like a one-time implementation. So it is a continuous process, making awareness within the organization for the employees, how to give the training, how to make them aware that security is their responsibilities, everyone's responsibility. Those are the key takeaways, I think. So you should think about when you implement any of the security solutions, whether it is on-prem, hybrid, or cloud-first environment.
Thank you, Sumit.
Thank you.
Anuba, what is the one key takeaway or final thought that you want to share?
So the one key takeaway is that as I'm leading the DevSecOps, so absolutely I will say the automations is a key. So is going to help you to enable and streamline the IAM processes, is going to help the great user experience, because think about it, user experience is equally important as we are implementing the identity access management. So use the automations and then have the proper planning, dedicated team, and then make sure this automation initiatives is aligned to your compliance, legal, and security requirement.
Thank you. Kat, one key takeaway or final thought?
You're not alone. Every organization is working hard to tackle identity challenges, and there are resources out to support you with ensuring identity security, the right amount of automation, as well as compliance. So if you're ever in a situation where, you want to know what's next, or you want to enhance your security, reach out to someone, reach out to me, reach out to a peer, let your questions be known, because other people probably have the exact same questions as you do.
Excellent. Tarek, one key takeaway or thought?
Yeah, I'll frame this really quickly just in the context of, as we're looking at, organizations are adopting more and more cloud capabilities, right? I think cloud infrastructure entitlement management is really pivotal in addressing really the complexity of cloud permissions and helping to enable organizations to enforce least privilege access and effectively manage sprawl and those considerations.
Thanks, Tarek. Ali, one final thought or key takeaway?
Yeah, I think it's split up into two. Number one, identity is a preventative measure. Advocate for it. It's really hard to give a return on investment finding on preventative measures. Do it. It's going to save you in the future. And number two, this is an ever evolving field of cybersecurity. There's no end. There's no complete. There's no we got it perfect. It's always going to move. you have to always be moving with it. And as some of our panelists mentioned, these compliance measures are always changing. The tools are constantly changing. Our viewpoint as professionals in identity is constantly changing. Keep up with it. It'll save you in the future. But yeah, it's expensive. It's not cheap.
I love that last point, Ali. And that was my final thought. IAM is a program. It is not a project. Been in this industry for 20 years. We haven't solved all the issues yet, but the core problems still exist. We need to ensure that the right people have the right access, and we need to ensure that that access is being used appropriately. So that's the core. It hasn't been solved. You're not going to solve it in one project. Treat IAM like a program. Appreciate the participation of all of our panel members today, our key sponsors, our gold sponsor, Silverfort, as well as our silver sponsor, Fisher Identity. And thank you for everyone who attended and gave us your time today and your listening. Hopefully this was a great session for you. I know it was for me. So thanks, and everyone have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.